Good morning, everyone. My name is Pranjal Borkatoki. I'm the events director with Recharge. It gives me great pleasure to welcoming you all today to the Recharge Wind Power Summit here in Hamburg, powered by Wind Energy Hamburg. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces and a lot of new ones. Thank you all very much for coming together today. Before we start the day today, we have a few housekeeping rules that I would like to run them by you. The venue people, CCH people told us that there is no planned fire drill today. So if you hear the fire alarm going off, please leave the building through those exits calmly. Organizing an event in a beautiful venue like this in Hamburg is a very expensive proposition, and we couldn't have done it without the support from our sponsors. Thank you to all our sponsors. We have an event app, which may I encourage you all to download it. You can download it using the QR code here, or you can find the QR code right behind your badge. The app is your go-to resource to know the agenda, the flow of the day. You get to know a little more about the speakers, and you can also connect with each other. If both of you have the app on your phone, you can connect with your fellow delegates. But most importantly, you can engage with the moderator from the audience. If the time permits, the moderator will pick up a question or two from the audience, and you can put those questions to the panel, being an audience also. So be participative, and I encourage you to download the app. To access the app, you need to use the username as your email, which you use to register for this event. And the password is very simple, Hamburg2025. The QR code is right behind your badge. And if you take any pictures today, and if you decide to post it in your social media channels like X, LinkedIn, Facebook, please use the hashtag Recharge Events so that we can locate them, we can share them on your behalf, or we can like them, if not anything. So please use the hashtag Recharge Events. We have a packed day with a lot of insightful discussions coming up today, and we have a brilliant lineup of speakers. To take us through the day, I will have my colleague Andrew Lee, editor of Recharge. But before I invite Andrew to come to the stage, it's my great pleasure to invite Heiko Stutzinger, CEO of Hamburg Messe and Congress, to come and offer us his welcome remarks. Heiko, please.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, or as we say in Hamburg, moin. As CEO of Hamburg Messe and Congress, I'm really delighted to welcome you here at the CCH Congress Center Hamburg to the Recharge Wind Power Summit powered by Wind Energy Hamburg 2025. After Washington, D.C. and Oslo, this summit moved to Hamburg, and as the name suggests, this marks the starting point of a cooperation between the world's leading wind energy trade fair and the industry's leading international publication. The program is exciting and diverse. Our keynote speakers and panelists are top class, and the exclusive exhibition area is excellently curated. I believe we have created together something truly outstanding here. This new partnership combines continuity with international reach. This afternoon, the official signing of a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, will take place at Hamburg City Hall. At its core is the further expansion of our collaboration between DN Media Group, the parent company of Recharge, and Hamburg Messe and Congress. Together with our partners from Enterprise Singapore and the Singapore Tourism Board, we will host a two-day Recharge Wind Power Summit Asia Pacific 2026, powered by Wind Energy Hamburg, next May in Singapore. And subsequently, in 2027 and 2029, we will organize a 3-day Wind Energy Asia Pacific powered by Recharge. Groundbreaking initiatives for us. Singapore is to the Asia Pacific region what Hamburg is to Europe, a leading international hub for wind energy. For Hamburg, the world's leading trade fair, Wind Energy Hamburg, which will be held next September, here plays a key role. And the timing of our Recharge Wind Power Summit could hardly be any better. Just last week, the COP30 World Climate Conference concluded in Belém, Brazil, and sent a clear message. We must accelerate the energy transition. And this is exactly why you are here today, to address challenges, remove obstacles, exchange information, present innovations, and seize opportunities. Together, we can keep wind energy on its strong global success path. As the German writer Erich Kästner once said, there's nothing good unless you do it. Or Nike's slogan, just do it. In this spirit, I wish all of us a successful Recharge Wind Power Summit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heiko. That's inspiring. And with that said, I give it to you, Andrew Lee, editor of Recharge, to take us through the day. Andrew.
Right, hello everyone. Welcome to Hamburg, and thank you, Pranjal, thank you, Heiko. Couldn't be anywhere better than Hamburg, one of the global centres of the wind power industry at a crucial time for the industry. I mean, we just heard COP30 has underlined the need to keep going with the energy transition. We all know there are challenges, and what we're here today to do is to see how we can remove some of those challenges and to press on. The agenda we have today, I'm really excited about. I hope you are too. And I think it's important to say it's been informed by what we at Recharge see as the issues that are driving interest in the industry. And we know they're driving interest because we can see the stories, the articles, the opinion pieces that are read by our own readers. And these themes will run through the day. So policy, what's working, what isn't working, and how can we fix it? The growing role of Chinese players in the international wind industry. We'll be talking about that. Wind wakes, there's an issue that has come from, not from nowhere, but from the left field to be a very important part of the debate. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about energy security and how wind is now a fundamental part of considerations in that field too. I'm going to crack on because you've come to hear our panelists and our speakers, not me. Our first session is our policy session, our outlook session. Where are we and where are we going? And I'm going to kick things off with a quick interview, a 15-minute interview with Dr. Anna Walbrecht, who is the head of division offshore wind energy at the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy of Germany. So she's ideally placed to get us going in Hamburg. Anna, will you join me on the stage, please? Please take a seat. Right, Anna, welcome, and thank you for giving us some time today. So, Germany's got big targets in offshore wind power. I think we all know there are challenges. We've seen some tenders that haven't worked. Germany's not the only country to have experienced that, but we need to get moving. So how are we going to get things back on track, in your opinion?
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me at this great event. And before we dig into the challenges, and I think that's a very important question to pose at the beginning, I'd like to also thank all of you being here. and I want to set a positive note as well. What I can see here is a very mature industry, a lot of interest in the field of offshore. We're not at the very beginning of this journey. Technical maturity has been reached. We have 9 gigawatts of installed capacity here in Germany. We also have just one park started supplying electricity to the grid just this week from EnBW. So I think there's also a little bit of a glass half full situation here. That being said, there are challenges if you look ahead. Of course, we have to deliver, and you have to deliver on the projects that have been tendered out in the past. I would be amiss not to mention this. Of course, what we saw in the past, and we're unfortunately in good company with this, we saw tenders failing to find bidders, also for the first time in Germany this year. So what we are doing right now is having a close look on costs. We very welcome all the input industry gave us. There will be some amendments to the regulatory framework, both driven by urgency and need that we see, but also by European legislation.
Okay, so give us an idea, Anna. We know from your analysis so far, what's been the problem in Germany specifically with the mechanism we've got? I mean, clearly it's not appealing to some in the industry. What, as you see it, are the problems?
Well, of course, I get your input on this, and we're eager to learn and to adapt. I think that's also something that good government has to do. But on the other hand, I want to say there are also some institutional elements to our system that have been proven to yield results. I think spatial planning in Germany is exceptional. Our agency for hydrography and maritime is just here in Hamburg. So I think those are elements that are proven, and also for you as an industry, having some sort of realism having some sort of stability in how things develop is important and needed. That being said, of course, we understand that the financial situation of the projects might be driven by cost increases, driven by some risks in revenues, and an overall uncertainty a little bit. Has worsened maybe. So I think it's important to think about mechanisms that can secure this type of situation and give you a little bit more comfort. We've started a market consultation that will end just before Christmas, so that's a little present you can give my team to work on. So that we can start to work on new designs for the future.
I mean, let's cut to the chase. I mean, what the industry would like, many have said, is they'd like a CFD. That's what they'd like to see, as in the UK and some other countries as well. Can we expect that?
Well, I think a CFD, it's not a new concept, right? It's something that has that we can, and we do. We exchange on a European level. We look across our borders what works. Unfortunately, also the CFD is not a CFD. There are a lot of elements to it that you can adjust. We've seen tenders fail with the CFD as well. So I think that's something to be considered as well. So it's not just a matter of how, not if, but also a matter of how. And what I also want to stress is that our ministers put forward a lot of guide principles, 10 guiding principles on how energy policy is supposed to develop in this legislation. So, and one big cornerstone of this is also having a lot of more realism when it comes to renewable planning. but also market orientation when you look at schemes. So all of these things have to be considered in looking at this system. But and you can see this in the market consultation, we already have quite some concrete ideas on this, and we're happy to get your comments on those.
Okay, before we move on to another topic, just staying with Germany. So the timetable, I think the industry, or some in the industry, have said, look, you know, you want to auction off 6 gigawatts. I think next year was what was the original plan. I mean, they're saying, but let's just shelve everything until we've sorted this out, because we don't want any more we don't want any more tenders that don't work. Postpone it. Sort it out, and then we go at the back end of next year. I mean, that's what they've called for. Any reaction to that?
Well, of course, this is something we take very seriously. We've talked to industry on different occasions. We received the input, and it's not me only in my individual unit, but everybody. More readers are there of these types of inputs. So this has been taken seriously. It is true that if we don't do nothing, we'll have 6 gigawatts next year. However, the process is not quite concluded on how to deal with the situation. The next regular tender will launch in February. So, of course, we're aware that a solution has to be found soon, or some communication on this has to be found soon. Yeah.
Okay. Right, let's widen things out a bit. I mean, here in Hamburg, 2026, early 2026, we've got the next North Sea Summit. Very exciting. Lots of European nations getting together. The last one in Ostend in 2023, if I'm correct, set some very big goals. And everyone was very expansive. I think 300 gigawatts. You know, that was. What can we expect, do you think, from the next summit? I mean, is it going to be different in outlook? Is there going to be a different sort of emphasis? Maybe rather than setting very big targets, actually focusing on how to get the industry moving. What do you think?
Well, for me, long-term stability and flexibility to adapt to actually making things happen are two elements of a good policy. So what everybody's working on is having the summit on the 26th of January here in Hamburg being a big success, and really dealing with the synergies you can leverage from working together on a European level. Of course, the national projects are part of that story. So whatever helps us as regulators, as policymakers, to exchange and find better solutions, I think that's welcome and helpful. And I'm confident that the North Sea Summit will contribute to this.
I mean, a key element of North Sea cooperation is interconnection between markets. I mean, that's been a major goal for years now. I mean, we've talked about super grids, smart grids, ultra grids, all kinds of things. Are you worried that is losing some momentum? I mean, we've seen, for example, energy islands, which were posited as a big part of the picture. You know, they're just being parked by nations. How do you see that evolving? The kind of the progress towards interconnection of offshore wind, particularly between different markets. Is it going as fast as we'd like it to?
Well, I mean, I'm the head of unit for offshore, so as fast as possible, as reliable as possible, as cost efficient as possible, that's always great. But I think it's what's clear is that also on our European levels, we have to tackle individual issues here. So again, I think format of working closely together is sensible. On the other side, some financials are not very different on a European level as on a national level, but I think they can, working together, can be a solution in driving down costs as well. Because, of course, if you lift synergies, if you look a little bit more across your own focus border, that's always helpful.
What role can the EU play in, in getting this, obviously within its member states, in cooperation, hopefully, with the UK? What role can the EU play in getting the show moving faster in terms of, an international offshore wind expansion?
Of course, the EU is an important partner in all of this. I think it's good to have these type of regional corporations like we have in the NSEC, as well on a European level. Some things like the financing framework, for example, are best dealt with if the EU has a strong part in this. So we believe that the EU is very important in this process.
I just want to quickly ask you about one of the themes we're going to discuss today is energy security, and really how wind power has moved from being a source of green, clean electrons, which it still is, but it's assumed a new role, possibly since the invasion of Ukraine, and is now seen as part of critical infrastructure, so socially important to an economy. Has that changed the way that that within government that you work within offshore wind? I mean, are you having to talk to more ministries? Are you having to take a different view than maybe you would have done 10 years ago, because wind power is now seen as so key to kind of national energy security?
For sure. I think offshore is one of it is a critical infrastructure. It's very exposed out there, and it's also in Germany close to marine commandos and military operations. So, of course, this is something to be considered. I wouldn't say this is completely new to the system. We have provisions in our law that have always secured offshore wind, both on a very physical level, but also by participating in government when looking at the build-out. But a lot of things are still to be done. If we look at cybersecurity, that's a very important issue. Again, legislation has moved forward there, both on a European level as on a national level. But of course, implementing this, being smart about this, also being aware that is something that we, against the geopolitical background we have, are very focused on improving. But I do feel that industry has already understood a lot of these challenges and is working on trying to find also technical solutions to a lot of these issues.
Because this is one of the things we're going to explore is the industry, for example, cybersecurity, is the industry really kind of on top of this issue? From what you can gather, is it in the offshore wind industry? Does it kind of really, is it high enough on the agenda? As far as you can see,
on the policy level,
yeah, for the industry, does the industry taking it seriously enough?
Our agency is in very close contact with everybody who builds a wind park in the Baltic Sea or in the North Sea, and my impression of the process is that this is a very tight exchange on a lot of the issues that regard monitoring and securing the parks. However, when it comes to cybersecurity, I think this is something that goes across board. It's not offshore specific. There's a lot to learn, and I do think being aware of this is sensible, and taking measures as well. So maybe moving away from cybersecurity, for example, this year, beginning of this year, we had the new spatial development plan, and the BSH, our agency, they issued obligation to install radar on offshore wind parks to contribute to security. So I do feel that there's some movement as well concerning these issues.
Okay, terrific. Anna, look, we've covered a lot there in a short period of time. Very grateful for your input. Please enjoy the rest of the event, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, and have a great day. So I hope this leads to even more knowledge gathering and exchange in the industry as well. So
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. Bye-bye. Right. Okay, I think a terrific start there from Anna, and it's time for our first panel of the day. And the title of the panel is Geared for Growth or Hindered by Policy. Pretty self-explanatory. Are we growing, or is policy holding us back or helping us to grow? And I'm going to welcome our first panelists onto the stage, if I could. We've got Dennis Renschmidt, Managing Director of VDMA Power Systems, Pedro Vinagre, who's Head of North and Central Europe for EDP Renewables, Fredrik Undren Sandberg, who's Head of Regulatory Affairs for Europe and Asia at RWE, Benjamin Seifert, who's Regional Head for Central and Northern Europe at Enercon, and Melissa Reid, who's Head of Regional Development for Renewables in the UK at Equinor. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me up on the stage? And please, if you could, maybe sit below your picture. Please. Maybe move, you just move along. Yeah. Okay. Right, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here in Hamburg. So we've just heard from Anna, from the German Ministry, and I want to kick off really by keeping it on offshore. We will move the debate onto dry land and onshore very soon, I promise. But just to stick with offshore wind for the time being. I mean, we talked to Anna about how to get things moving and how to get the mechanism right. And as we said, we've seen auctions too often misfiring across Europe. And how are we going to fix that? What do we need to put in place to get things moving? I think we'll start with Fredrik at RWE. I mean, you're in a lot of these markets. You've got a really wide view. What do you see? How are we going to fix this? How are we going to get these auctions moving again?
Yes, thank you so much. Moin, first of all. That's the important word today. Well, I mean, just zoom out a bit to why we're doing this. I want to start with that, because I think that it's very evident that we need these technology. I mean, if you look at Europe, we are at an import dependency on energy for 60% of all of our energy. We're spending $250 billion a year on importing energy, so we need this. Then the question is, how do we make sure that this actually happens? Well, you need space to put it, so you need land area. I think we're getting that sorted now in onshore for Germany. We're permitting 16 gigawatts this year, I believe, something like that. So we're getting that sorted. We, of course, also need grid, which is taking too slow, I would say, to build out. But then the third thing I really want to push at is, of course, the revenue. You need revenue to make these things work. And there I cannot say this more bluntly, that we need a double-sided CFD. There's a revenue stabilization mechanism, and just to be clear, it will lower cost for the consumer and it gives the certainty for the industry. You could, of course, also have a free market build-out, but the thing is that we as a company are not really we don't really have the remit on how to steer the market. So I mean, it might be that politicians at some point in time in the future decide to put in more energy into the system, and that will affect power prices and there can be tax and so on. So we need this certainty. Now, secondly, a double-sided CFD is not enough. So we've seen some CFD auctions which has been successful, but then doesn't lead to actually build projects. And I would say that if there is a successful auction that doesn't lead to build out projects, that is simply not a successful auction. So you also need to have the mechanism in place, you need to have certain penalties, you need to have the right ceiling price and so on, otherwise it simply won't work.
Okay, I mean, the UK has the CFD that everybody likes. Sticking with Frederick for the moment, Frederick on the UK. I mean, that has what everyone wants, the CFD. Now, as you've already mentioned, that's no guarantee. We've seen misfiring auctions in the UK too. Just want to get your view of the UK at the moment. We've got AR7 coming around. We don't know the outcome. We're in the midst of it, and I appreciate, you can't comment on the actual the commercial sensitivities. But what we do know is that some people have said already there's not enough budget. There's not enough in the pot. If you're serious about this, you need to really get behind it. What's your view of where we look like we are at the moment with AR7? Are you optimistic?
Well, so I think most industry was quite disappointed actually at the budget that was allocated for AR7, especially for offshore. It was 900 million. We're hoping with somebody that at least had another digit to it. So I think this is simply a lost opportunity for the UK if they don't promote more. Now, there is of course some optimism to say that there is this peaking power. We'll know that. So hopefully if they look at all the bids coming in, there will be a bit of an uplift. But I really hope that the government in the UK really take this opportunity, because there's so many ready-to-build projects that can actually be actuated. And to let that opportunity slip with all the supply chain implications that comes with, I think it's just, it would be very, very sensible, no?
Okay. Let's stick with that theme. Melissa from Equinor, welcome. Equinor is a kind of pioneer of offshore wind in the UK, off East Anglia. Your thoughts at the moment on the UK, and then more widely, what do we need to do to make auctions moving? AR7 first of all. I think you had a project that could possibly be eligible. I'm not asking you to comment on that, but generally, from what we know, are you optimistic, or are you a bit worried?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, good morning. It's really good to be here today. I guess I want to kind of maybe follow on from the theme that Anna set earlier on. And, we're talking a lot about challenges here, but also there's a lot to sort of celebrate. And in the UK, in 2 weeks' time, we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of offshore wind. So 25 years ago, the first turbines in Blythe were commissioned. And I think we've come a really long way since then. And I think, the UK has kind of showcased some of those policy frameworks and levers that we would like to see across Europe, such as that two-sided CFD, and wholeheartedly agree with Frederick on that point. I think that has been one of the key reasons for the success of the industry. But having said that, I think we do need to take a beat and reflect now on sort of the future. I think the allocation rounds, we're heading into 7. We've had 6 previously. They haven't all been a success. Allocation round 5 had no bids at all. And the reason for that was the strike price was just set too low for the market at that time. Having said that, government responded. For allocation round 6, we saw the ability for projects to rebid a portion of their projects. We also saw the strike price increased. But having said that, again, we've only seen less than 1 gigawatt coming through from allocation round 6, because projects were subsequently handed back. So what we were really hopeful with allocation round 7 is kind of more of a bumper round, having had sort of 5 and 6 really delivering less than 1 gigawatt of capacity. The government, again, has sort of listened and pulled some policy levers. We've seen a longer CFD term, so going up to 20 years, which really helps in terms of investor confidence and bringing the cost of capital down. We also saw a change to the reference prices to more realistic. So what that means in reality is the budget stretches a bit further. And we also saw an additional delivery year added. So again, responding to industry's concerns about supply chain constraints and so on. However, there is a missing piece, and that is the final budget. And I think, again, as Frederick's touched on, the budget is set at a level currently which isn't going to kind of deliver the projects that are needed to meet the government's Clean Power 2030 targets. You know, we're coming up fast against 2030. We really need to be contracting, you know, up to 20 gigawatts in the next 2 allocation rounds to make sure that we can deliver against those. And external analysis has indicated that the budget as currently set will deliver between 3 to 7 gigawatts. So we've got a little way to go. So I think the issue is, you know, we have got the two-sided CFD. We have got many of the policy levers in place in response to industry concerns, but there is still a missing piece. And I think, you know, we need a holistic picture to be able to really progress and deliver in terms of the government's ambition.
Okay, before we move on to dry land, just sticking with offshore, floating wind, Melissa. I mean, Equinor's was the pioneer of floating wind out off Scotland and then in Norway. Now, I mean, here's an industry that we're going to talk about a bit today through various sessions. I think it's fair to say it's not moved as fast as people hoped. And there are some cost challenges. Can I get Equinor's view or your view of where we are with floating wind? I mean, I think Equinor said recently what we need scale. You know, that's what's going to crack it for floating wind. Are you optimistic? And is Equinor still committed to floating wind in the UK and more generally?
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. And the short answer is yes. Maybe to put a bit of backstory to that, as you say, you know, Equinor was sort of involved in demo floating back in 2009, and since then we've scaled it up. We have, I think, about half the floating capacity globally. So it is still a technology we're very much believing in. I think that's demonstrated by the fact that we participated and were fortunate enough to win 1.5 gigawatts of floating acreage in the Celtic Sea earlier this year. I think, as you say, though, the industry isn't moving as fast as we had originally anticipated, and it's a complex technology. It's at the forefront of really kind of pushing the boundaries of bringing this, you know, into commercialization. And in the sort of framework that we've got in terms of, you know, increasing steel prices, you know, high inflation, high interest rates, it is just more of a difficult proposition than, you know, originally we'd all thought. But it is still a long-term proposition. And, you know, again, what we've seen in terms of the UK support, we have a floating specific CFD. The administrative strike price for this year is set at £271. So, you know, what we're really seeing is that government backing for floating, which is going to be needed to actually bring this forward. And once we start to get that scale, we'll see the industrializations, we'll see that come down the cost curve. And once we get to that tipping point, I think it will be an industry that's very much needed to bring forward the targets and ambitions across the globe.
Okay, thanks for that. So let's obviously policy matters hugely in offshore wind. It also matters in onshore wind just as much. Pedro from EDPR. I mean, you as a company made a very deliberate decision to look at Germany as a growth market, as a key growth market, onshore for not just wind but for solar and storage and the whole gamut of renewables on land. How's that going, and are you getting what you need from, first of all, Germany in terms of policy support, but also perhaps you can give us a kind of glimpse of more widely across Europe how you think the policy framework is doing in supporting onshore renewables?
Thanks for the question, and first of all, good morning everyone, and thanks for having me. I think if I look at Europe as a whole, we can always say that support is never enough. But I think as being a renewable developer for, I don't know, over 20 years now, working in 20 plus geographies, having to deal with different governments, different political cycles, different, I would say, macroeconomic contexts. I think that the key word here is adaptability, and I think we've proved that we can do it, and that was, I think, that is one of our greatest strengths. When we decided to enter Germany back in, I think, late 2022, we did an acquisition of a solar development platform, but our goal was always to be a multi-technology company. And that is what we've been doing in the last 2-3 years. We've just recently inaugurated our first solar park in Katin. Hopefully by year end we'll have our second solar park also entering into operation. I think we have the team actually in a lot of cities, which is something that is different from the other European countries where we normally are located in, say, one of the main cities. Here we have people spread across the country. And so I think we are pretty optimistic, because I think it's easy to get pessimistic and only look at the hurdles. I always say that when we look at the renewable development project, I mean, it takes like, every single project is like a PhD in project management, because you have so many stakeholders and so many hurdles along the way that, I mean, if you don't keep your eyes on the ball, you're going to lose it. And so I think that's also why we look for talent, and that's why I think in this industry we have so much talent. If I focus on Germany, I think it's an incredible country. The targets are very ambitious. I don't think we are actually there in terms of development. I think, if my calculations are not wrong, I think we will need to put on the ground circa like 3-4 wind turbines per year to reach the 2030 goals in the country. So that's, I would say, massive, although I think the wind development, or deployment better said, has been growing at a significant rhythm. I think we're still failing to see a complete transparency and adherence between what are the political, or let's say central defined goals, versus local implementation. So I think, I mean, if you look at wind priority areas, for instance, many of the states have not yet defined or approved where those wind priority areas are, whether others have, and so that creates, I think, an asymmetry in terms of, let's say, unlocking opportunities. There's a lot of, I think, a lack of digitalization in the whole process, and this is not only for Germany, but I think even as a non-German, you guys are, I mean, Germany is probably the big reference in the EU in terms of industry, and I was expecting much more digitalization in terms of the processes, which I have not seen here. And I think this is something we need to work on. So, I mean, permits are long, very, very long, and waiting 1 year to get a feedback, it's hard, but it's not different from the other countries. What I think is that intermediate feedback, if there is some bottleneck, some showstopper in terms of your project, if you can get it after 2 months and not wait the full circle of 1 year to get the feedback that you could have had in like a couple of months, this is something that I think we need to clearly work on. Then we all need stability, and for doing our investments, we need stability. CFDs that you've been talking, either one side or two side CFD, I mean, those bring stability to our investments. That stability allows us to take final investment decisions, and I think that is, of course, something that we all look for. We look for standardization, stability, but if I have to pinpoint one thing that I believe is critical in the industry, is that we need decisions to be made. We are in a position, and I think in the last conversation you were having, you talked about energy independence and the impact that the war in Ukraine had in the whole of Europe, actually in the world. And I think that since 2021 to today, it's been 4 years, and I think we're lacking the ability and the political ability to stop the cycles of short-term decisions, thinking on the next political cycle, and go for the long-term value creation decisions. And I think that if I had to pinpoint one thing, I would say create dialogue with the industry. I think we all have the best interest in doing the best for the society, because that's, I think, the general purpose of everything that we do, and take the decisions, because the ideas are there.
So that's an interesting point. I mean, I was going to ask you how confident you are in the long term. I mean, I think Germany has put in place some terrific. The permitting is quicker. The targets are high. When onshore here, we're staying with. They've really gone, and the auctions are coming through. There's it's all heading in the right direction. But of course, I mean, you've made the point. And if we widen this out across Europe, I mean, we can see in some markets, the policy is not just sceptical; it's hostile to renewables development. And how can we be confident for the long term in this very kind of fluid political situation we're now in Europe?
I think I'll go again to first. I want to share an interesting data that for me is completely striking, which is when we talk about renewables penetration in the world and in the different countries in Europe, for instance. We always say, okay, so we are like 60%, 80%, 70%, 90% in some of the countries, and I think that's amazing. But this is only probably 20% of the renewable potential that we have in the world, because the other 80% is how do we electrify the consumption. And there's a lot of industries that depend on other energy sources other than electricity, I mean. And once that shift is done, we will unlock a lot of growth in demand. It's not only electric vehicles, data centers that are now I would say the big buzzword when you talk about increasing demand, but it's also about unlocking that electrification. And when you look at the world, there is one country that is doing that, and starts with a C, and we all know who they are. They are electrifying their consumption a lot, and that is unlocking, of course, a lot of, a rise in demand that is unseen. But going back, I think political cycles are there, and they're going to be there. Everyone was afraid of the new cycle with Trump. Depending on the industry, if you talk of offshore, onshore, of course, solar impacts have been different. But I think all of us, all of our companies have proven over the years to have what it takes to deal with the different cycles. Whether it's because renewables are a priority in the agenda, now they are not. Now we have a favorable government, now we have a non-favorable government. If you think of the UK, I would say that today we have a pro-renewable or more pro-renewable government. Still decisions are taking long. So grid access in the UK is about, just to give you an idea, if you apply for a grid application today in the UK, you most probably will not get a date. But if you get a date, it's like 2036. If you're doing renewable development, that's completely crazy. And there's the grid reform that has been discussed for the last couple of years. I think this is something that needs, again, to be decided and implemented, because the ideas are there.
Just need to get on with it. Yeah, okay, thanks. Benjamin from Enercon, you're making fantastic turbines in Europe. You rely on policy not only to create demand, so projects that you can sell your turbines to, you also rely on policy on an industrial level to support your place in the manufacturing bedrock of Germany or other markets. So you see policy from two sides. Are you getting what you need from German policy, from European policy? Are you getting what you need? And if you're not, what has to change?
Yeah, I think, and good morning, everybody. I think we have to distinguish between Europe on the one hand, the different countries, and also Germany. And if we see the development within Germany during the last 3 or 4 years, when we had the old government in 2022, it was decided to have 10 gigawatt as annual installation target for wind onshore, and everybody was making jokes saying, never ever, this will not happen. And there were clear requirements coming from the industry to the government again, saying, hey, we need to have a very simplified permitting process, we need to have a good tariff system, and we need to build up the supply chain, including logistics. And these were the clear requests. And the government at the time took it very serious. And out of these discussions, the industry was good enough to build up 15 gigawatt of building permits 2024. It'll be the same value this year. I do not agree that it takes still pretty long. If you're close to the market, it just takes you 4 months to get a building permit, and this is really fast. And we just need to maintain the speed. Now we will see the installations coming up, which is positive with all the permits being there, so also the energy price drops, what the government is looking for. But of course now we have the next challenge, and this is for the turbine manufacturers, the same with the operators and the developers. We got to make sure what is the next step, just bringing in the turbines into the grid and going with this produce and forget. This will not work anymore because the grid is full. So we have to think more in an integrated way, combining the turbines with the hybrids, with the batteries, trying to connect behind the meter to the industry facilities. This is where we aim to go for. And I think that's a good example of Germany, how we do it. And of course, now we have to make the next steps. If we go into Europe and going more into, let's say, the industry politics that we were looking for, and starting with your comment from the beginning, it all started with the invasion of Russia and the Ukraine. The first comments coming from the European Union were, European Commission, okay, now we realize how sensitive energy supply is. And it's not only about availability, it's also about price. And these were the two drivers. And it was very clear at that time, we have to do something. And then we got the Green Deal. And then there was the Repower EU. And there were lots of discussions on let's implement an independent supply chain that produces the components in Europe for being secured in the future. And that was 2 years ago. And when we see what happened during the last 2 years in regards of let's say proposals and regulations coming from the European Commission, now we have a Net Zero Industry Act coming in, which is very complex. And does it force resilience within a supply chain in Europe? No. It just said, be diverse. Try to not get your components from specific countries. So that doesn't really support Europe. And these ideas coming in, the same with CBAM, also coming in, making components from Europe more expensive. So if the aim was from the European Commission, let's secure supply chains from Europe and keep it cheap and simple, competitive, the regulations that we now see go in the wrong direction. So we have on the one hand Germany, which is doing a good job here, but we also see the European Commission where we have to support further to also get it simplified in a way that meets to the targets that were set. And then you also have the next challenge, you have rules from the European Commission, and they make it very clever. They just say, these are the rules, please, dear member states, bring it into your regulations. It's your job. And then you have a mix. So with the 26, 27 countries in, you will see a huge range of regulations coming. It won't be simplified.
I mean, is this a sort of basically a fundamental problem about having the EU sitting over these policies with all these states? That it's just really difficult to get a policy that works for you anyway, in terms of focusing a national supply chain. I mean, how can we fix this?
Sometimes maybe having less rules than complex rules. And if you do it per country, it won't help to simplify a supply chain. And if the original target was create resilience in Europe, then it has to be stated, and there needs to be a benefit for doing such industrialization here. And this is what we are missing today, the clear response to the targets set.
Okay. I mean, we're going to talk today about the possible role of Chinese wind turbines in the European market. I mean, clearly this is something that Enercon has talked about in the past, and you've got. I mean, it's no surprise what your position on it will be. But I mean, I'll allow you to set it out. You know, what are your problems with having a role for Chinese wind turbines in the European market? I mean, isn't it just good competition for
it's not about a specific country. It's about having a fair, level playing field. Do we have the same rules? Do we have the same pricing? Do we have the same subsidies? And do we also care about the items that we discussed earlier? Do we secure the energy in regards of cybersecurity? Do we know what we install here? And if this is all fixed, then it doesn't matter where the components come from because it all ends up being installed here in Europe.
Yeah. Okay. Dennis Renschmidt from VDMA. I mean, you speak for the German supply chain. We've just touched upon some of the challenges for the supply chain. I mean, from your point of view, are policymakers delivering in Germany? If not, what needs to change? And then, you know, your position on the potential role of Chinese turbines. Has Germany got a big enough supply chain to meet the demand on its own?
Thanks very much. Yeah, first of all, I would like to say congrats for your choice of this event location, because you have chosen the biggest and most attractive market all over Europe. So we are really tremendously growing. I mean, I understand, there's no offense, but I understand journalists always pointing to the challenges. But let's be honest, this is a great success we're seeing here on the European continent with a German government that has been doing a great job. We talked about it already, this very high ambitions concerning the targets, but also doing really progress on the ground. We established the overriding public interest, which made a huge step forward. So this is probably something which is sometimes a bit less emphasized, and I would emphasize that in the first place. What we are really looking forward is the spill over to other countries. I mean, that's definitely something we're still lagging. We need that. So what we would like to see is that other countries in Europe are catching up and are having same effects, and also can maybe learn from each other and from Germany what has been done well in this country. And the consequence is that we have very strong supply chains in Germany, and also delivering these supply chains within Europe. I mean, not only Enercon, but also other OEMs, and also the supply chain behind it, Tier 2, Tier 3, are really, really strong in Germany and in Europe. And we're delivering very well, and we're also benefiting from these positive developments you just mentioned. Now, your question is, can we deliver? And the very, very clear answer to that is yes, we can. So there's enough flexibility, and there's enough production capacity within Europe to meet the targets, and even to be on a higher scale if other countries will be growing faster than today. Also, when we make the projection for the whole of Europe, we've seen that the production capacity is sufficient and will be sufficient. And we can ramp up. Yeah? So if the regulation and if the, let's say, policy outlook is stable, we talked about that as well, and is positive, then the supply chain will definitely be investing and ramping up the production capacities. It's rather the question, what we touched upon as well. So do we need actually supply from other regions out of Europe? I don't see that, because there is enough production capacity within the European continent. The second question would be, is there enough competition? So do we see innovation? Yes, as well. I mean, we've seen tremendous cost regression during the last couple of years and during the last decades. See where we're coming from. Like, the wind industry in Europe is like 40 years old. And if you compare the cost where we're coming from to today, it's a tremendous cost regression. So the competition is there. There is enough incentive to be innovative and to bring costs down. Third question is, do we rely on other regions of the world, and is it actually wise to do so? So that is more or less the question of the security and the cybersecurity issue. And we're very, very skeptical about that, because we are talking not about plastic toys here coming from other regions of the world. No, we're talking about critical infrastructure. And that is really something different than talking about consumer goods or something else. So we cannot rely, let me be here very outspoken and very vocal, we cannot rely on supply coming from regions of the world that are in a political competition with us, and sometimes also are prone to interference with, on political levels. I mean, there are laws existing saying that states have to make decisions on the enterprises coming from other countries out of the European region, and we cannot accept that as Germany and as European countries.
Okay. Well, we've got a panel coming up where we'll dig into these specific issues. I mean, generally on the supply chain, let's go back to our developers and ask them about their view of the robustness of the supply chain at the moment. Frederick, from RWE's point of view, I mean, you've got big ambitions in Europe and even globally. Is the wind power supply chain in good shape to deliver what you need to build your projects cost effectively?
Yeah, I think in general, yes, I would say. So I mean, we do have, I mean, if you look at onshore, we do have sufficient production capacity in Europe to supply that. We also know that we are very much dependent on the outside world. So I mean, I think we could definitely deliver on our targets. Then there are specific bottlenecks. I think especially in offshore wind, we don't have maybe as much competition that we would like. And I think that there are some bottlenecks across that supply chain. But in general, I mean, I'm not that worried about, and sorry to simplify it, but I'm not really worried about not getting the propellers. But I think that what is really lacking is just this long-term stability, so we don't get the ramp ups and downs. So we cannot have 16 gigawatts being built out 1 year and then 1 gigawatt the next year. We need some stable, coordinated framework across Europe. If we have to get the stability, I'm sure that the supply chain can plan. I'm sure that they can ramp up. I'm sure there will be sufficient supply to make that happen. And that's also, Elgon was saying, I mean, we just need also to have the fair standards. We need to have fair standards on cybersecurity. It's critical that we get that in place. We need to have fair standards on resilience of the supply chain and so on. But if we get all that set, then we would like to have free competition to make sure that we also tap into the global dynamism of the supply chain so we get low costs.
I mean, you say you're a little bit worried there's not enough competition. Is that in offshore wind? I mean, is that a concern?
I mean, maybe offshore. So, yes, I think
you'd like to see more players.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I mean, I would say that. I mean, we do have very good players in Europe, but we could definitely see that. I mean, it would help if we get more competition in this field, yes, and more suppliers in. I think that would be good for the suppliers here, but for that to happen, we need to have a bigger market, right? So we need to have more offshore wind installations. Then I think there will be room enough for everyone.
Yeah. Melissa, from Equinor's point of view, are you confident in the supply chain? Is there enough competition, and is the supply chain robust enough to deliver what you need?
I think, and again, the short answer is yes. But the supply chain is, I think we could all benefit from more competition in terms of kind of cost competitiveness and so on. Maybe one of the key things is, and this sort of relates back to one of my previous points, the supply chain, we've touched on this already, needs to see future visibility of pipeline, and investments need to be made now for projects that will be coming forward in 10 years' time. So if we're in this kind of boom and bust cycle of a huge amount of projects coming through and then many years of actually non-delivery, that isn't helpful for the supply chain, and what we might see then is kind of a scaling back of some of those factories and so on, which then doesn't help us in terms of developers in terms of delivery. I think the other key point, it's more about kind of phasing and timing, because there is this pressure in terms of projects coming through and maybe not enough capacity. We're needing to make very early commitments. So, I mean, DC cables is a good example of that. So the lead-in times for that are very long. So developers are having to make upfront investments and commitments, before we've got certainty of permits and consents, definitely before we've got certainty of revenue support. So, there's a lot of upfront risk on developers already. So kind of adding that into the mix, I think really is adds to the risk profile of these projects. I think one thing we've been sort of trying to talk to government about as an industry is whether there's some way of a more kind of strategic procurement approach to some of these long lead items, and actually government sort of, you know, reserving slots on the basis that projects will come in. So, you know, some of these things can't be solved on a project by project basis. It needs to be a more kind of holistic view of, we have an industry we believe in, we'll make this upfront investment, and then as the projects come through, they can then sort of buy into those manufacturing slots and so on. So I think that would be a really welcome approach and help, again, for projects who are sort of putting in considerable amount of costs up front.
Okay, great. Before we close, I want to change gears slightly. I mean, this panel, this session is looking at things that have shaped policy in wind power this year, and it's kind of impossible to ignore the fact that the leader of the world's biggest economy has taken a position on wind power that many of us here may not agree with, but he's taken that position. Now, not all of you are active in the US, not all of you have positions in the US or briefs in the US, but what I would suggest is that potentially Donald Trump's position on wind power has implications beyond the US. I mean, he's taken action on tariffs. He's obviously taken action within the borders of the United States that will have ripple effects on the global supply chain. So my question is really, from a global point of view, has Donald Trump damaged wind power globally? Has he helped it in some way? What's been the impact, do you think? I mean, anyone got any views on that? Who wants to sort of share with us? Anyone?
From my point of view, I would say what he definitely did is he made clear that it's not only about markets and competition in technology, but it's also about security. And so that's what he made clear. I understand everybody who's saying, well, we need more competition. Now we have really strong growth, and of course developers are a bit suffering from that. And that is the one point of the coin. Of course we have to digest growth. Yeah, that is really, I mean, that is a challenge. But we have to differentiate within the discussion as well these market stuff and things from the security issues. This is a completely different story. We cannot, as developers or as manufacturers, make the security discussion without having the very, let's say, societal view. So this is something which has been decided on a political level. This is because all of our country, all of our society is relying on a functioning energy system. If this is, and this is at stake, this is really at stake. If we take this into consideration, we run into deep problems. That is what Trump made clear.
Okay, he's certainly taken a strong position on that. Anyone got any views on, you know, what his legacy for the for wind power will be?
I can have a go. So I mean, I think that yes. I mean, in the short run, of course, he's not fostering policies to promote offshore wind or onshore wind in the US. That is quite clear. But I mean, I think the long-term logic for these technologies is still around, right? So there is demand growth in the US. As you say, data centers is now the new, let's not call it hype, but the new buzzword, right? But there is fundamental energy demand in the market, and wind is a very competitive way of supplying this. That also goes for offshore wind in certain coastal areas where they simply don't have that onshore wind potential. So I think in the long run, the logic is still there. In the long run, we're still going to get these things supplied. But of course, in the short run, if you don't have favorable policy or even negative policy, it might take longer. Okay.
Melissa?
Yeah, I can maybe add a kind of real-life example as well from our Empire Wind project in the US. And we have a fully permitted project in construction, and a stop order was put on that by Donald Trump, which ended up leading to an impairment of $1 billion for the company. And you know, that's one project. But going back to your point about what that impacts globally, you know, every company has a limited amount of capital to deploy, and I think, you know, if we're seeing those risks evolve in one market, that really does then sort of have knock-on impacts for other markets as well, which, you know, and not only that, it's things like the tariffs. We've publicly said, that was $300 million additional cost to the project. So, these things do have a kind of a knock-on effect for the economics and therefore the cost to the consumer of individual projects. But then the knock-on effects to the whole portfolio shouldn't be underestimated as well.
I don't suppose you can share with us how it got back on track. It sort of came. It was parked and then it was unparked. And
yes, we were lucky enough to have the stop order lifted. Yes,
there's a story to be told.
It's still progressing. It's in construction, but again, that level of risk doesn't go away. And
right.
In terms of long-term certainty, it's still a little bit uncertain in that market. So.
Yeah. Okay.
And we stopped our Empire 2 project as a result as well.
Okay. Yeah, Pedro. Right.
Just our time is running up. Maybe not specifically on the wind, but more on the impact of on Trump. I would challenge the greatest economy in the world as of today, but the impact is for sure there. And I think that if we look at the geopolitical situation that we have today and this Trump election, I mean, whether or not people that voted back in, 1 year ago or something like that, whether they regret it or not, having voted for him, whether or not there is a third term for Trump, I think that we are losing memory of a generation that has been through very tough times in the world. And I think our new generations, who I think these ones and the future ones are the biggest purpose why we're doing this, why we're doing renewable development. I think we cannot forget that the greatest purpose of everything that we do is to tackle climate change, to make sure that we have sustainability for future generations. I think these new generations need to clearly stand on the right side of history and understand exactly what they need to do, what are the choices that they need to make in order to prevent bad things that like we've had in the past, and we're losing memory of that, and I think that's a very important topic.
It's a very thoughtful note, perhaps to conclude on. I think. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground. I'm very grateful to all of you. I think for your insights, and thank you very much. And please enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, look, I hope you enjoyed the first panel as much as I did. Thanks again to all our guests there. I'm going to move on to our next agenda item, which is another interview. And this time, I'm very pleased to welcome to the stage Danielle Jarski, who is CEO of Iberdrola Energia Internacional. And she's going to talk about Iberdrola with us. Danielle, please join me on the stage. Thank you. Please have a seat. Danielle. Hello. Right. Thank you very much. It's great to see you. Yeah, not at all. So, Iberdrola will need little introduction to most of us here, I'm sure. One of the world's biggest, most ambitious producers of green power for several decades now. Iberdrola is changing its strategy, or evolving its strategy. Recently, some of you may have seen and read in Recharge that its chairman set out a kind of new focus for the business, and I'm going to ask Danielle to start off with to kind of talk to us about that a little bit, but importantly for the audience here, where wind fits in, because Danielle, I think I'm right in saying that the bulk of investment from Iberdrola going forward for the next few years will be in networks, but that wind will remain a key element of your agenda. So welcome again, and please outline to us, where's Iberdrola going?
Thanks, Andrew, and again, thanks for having me. And before I focus on Iberdrola and its strategic plan, which has been just outlined recently for the next years, let me just build on what I heard this morning and remind us with a bit of a positive foundation in this kind of depressive November. We've heard some voices here this morning. The fundamental key is electrification. And electrification is unstoppable. And as we have seen in the pandemic, for humans, it's not easy to understand exponential growth. In case of electrification, not saying we have it exponentially, but it's massive in the sense that by 2035, so less than 10 years from now, we grow electrical demand by 50%. I mean, these numbers are quite mind-blowing. And in that context, I think the journey of our industry and also the growth as such is unstoppable. Of course, we need to get a few pillars and frameworks adjusted again to see the next decade of growth. And speaking of that, with regards to Iberdrola, yes, indeed, a significant amount of our investment goes into networks. However, I hope I see pleased faces here, because what we need as a wind industry is indeed the grid capacity as such. And I think we fundamentally believe that this is a key strategic investment to build the whole holistic part of the energy system. Looking more to renewables and wind as such, our strategic plan and the investments for until 2028 are 21 billion. So this is quite a significant amount of investment we are putting onto renewables, in particular wind, which is more than half of it, and also in particular in offshore wind with 8 billion in the next years to come of investment. And I think it's important to also consider in that what's needed for this. It's of course what we heard this morning, but at the same time to remind our industry that with this delivery of growth and investments, we need to continue to have a sustainable and resilient path. And in context now of fossil fuels, for example, and we are the resilient ones here. We sometimes forget this in the context of renewables growth, grid challenges, etc. But if you reflect on the recent crises of the last couple of years, I think in particular looking at volatility part and also uncertainty part, in context of geopolitical situation, we are here the cornerstone and stable one.
Okay. So, I mean, you said networks, we need the grids, we need the networks. I think everybody would agree with that. And that's going to be the bulk of Iberdrola's investments. But you've already said a significant big number still going towards renewables, including wind power. I think your chairman said when he unveiled the new strategy that with renewables, the focus for Iberdrola is going to be selective and opportunistic. That's how he put it. So help me with this. What do you think is going to constitute an attractive wind project for Iberdrola in the kind of future? What are you looking for when you look to develop a wind farm?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of stating here the obvious in context of our investments. Is of course we are focusing more and more on stability and A-rated countries. So it's a kind of focus also in geographical terms. Nevertheless, what does a successful wind project need? We did hear this morning already. To be competitive, of course, you need to have clarity on the route to market, on the supply chain, and also have a regulatory framework which is sufficient enough, but not overboarding, to deliver this project in a respective and sufficient timeline. And I mean, Germany is a good example. Yes, digitization maybe not at the forefront. However, permitting, we achieved by now a 7 months permitting period in onshore wind, which is leading in the European Union. And I think these are good examples of what successful wind projects do need.
Do you see any divergence, any distinction between the trajectories of offshore wind, which you've been a pioneer in Iberdrola, and onshore wind? I mean, do you think there's any difference in outlook or attractiveness for those two sectors in terms of where you're going to be putting your money in the future?
First of all, I think wind is one of the cornerstones of the energy, not only the energy transition, but also the energy system of the future. And as we all are aware, offshore and onshore differs when it comes not only to its application, but offshore really provides you with scale, which I think is important in particular for developers to achieve also a certain LCE, but also a certain growth, but also for the governments and the national energy plans as such. So scale as one kind of key characteristic of offshore, and also kind of the long-term perspective of operations and growth. Whilst onshore wind, I think in a very competitive environment, needs to still be grown where relevant, but at the same time also have this local embeddedness in the communities.
Okay, let's talk a bit about the supply chain. I mean, we've heard already from some supply chain members. Are you confident that the wind power supply chain is in good shape to deliver what you need to build your projects and build them economically? And do you think there's enough competition in the supply chain?
This is a good question, Andrew. Let me just build the bridge to your initial opening of as I sit here for Iberdrola. Just to put that in context, a supply chain. We will spend 65 billion with our suppliers in the next years until 2028, and to put that also in context of what this means geographically, global context, etc. Alone last year, we've spent 90% of our supply chain spends locally. And I think this is the key strength of the wind industry, that you have this local embeddedness and also the kind of footprint from a sustainable but also from a community perspective. To your question of competitiveness, well, I pull out, I'm for over 2 decades long veteran in this industry, and still I always come back to the same kind of valid triangle of we need to have this competitiveness. At the same time, we need to have sustainability and the security of supply in the supply chain for wind turbines going forward. And if I may outline a bit or put a bit more meat to the bone what this means, competitive means, of course, a heterogeneous landscape of suppliers. And at the same time, it means also that we need to have the quality which is needed for the projects and the investments to put either on water or land. And what we have seen in the recent past with the kind of rapid innovation cycles of turbine generations, we, of course, in any kind of project and see with bigger turbine sizes, positive impact on the business case as such. However, we must all, as an industry, be reminded that quality is a key pillar and fundamental, essential for any project. And with recent turbine generations, we've seen example that even wind turbine suppliers needed to pause new generations. We should all be very much focused on the maturity of our industry, and with that also the quality coming along.
Do you think there are enough players in the market to deliver? Would you welcome, for example, the chance to procure turbines from Asia, turbines from China in the European market? Would that be something that would be welcome in your view?
Well, overall, I think we need to be competitive as an industry. So I wouldn't exclude at this point of time and neglect in a black and white approach anything. And what we have seen over the last decades of this industry is that always kind of innovation, a level playing field has been essential for the success of this industry. And therefore, a competitive environment, of course, helps overall to the delivery of the projects to come, and even more to its competitiveness.
Okay. Before we wrap up, I'd like to get your view on how wind projects are going to look going forward. I mean, you know, maybe the days of just a wind farm connected to the grid and that was it. We're seeing new dynamics, aren't we? We're seeing demand from new sources like data centers. I know Iberdrola is extremely focused on, and we're seeing a growing role for storage. How are those dynamics going to change projects, do you think, as we go forward?
Well, overall, I think it reminds us very much that we need to more and more even think about the energy system in a holistic picture. A wind project will stay a wind project, if I may say, with its proven technology. And at the same time, of course, it needs to have the environment of a clear framework and kind of the fit in the system. Data centers, as you highlighted, these are one of the key growth drivers we see in the electrification ongoing. And with that, of course, a clear opportunity for the wind industry to also have their the opportunity to support this growth. In the end, it still boils down, frankly speaking, to what are the market conditions, what is the regulatory framework, do we have their clear framework which is not overboarding and at the same time gives long-term perspective, in the sense that we have between time span of being awarded, for example, in offshore. I think we heard some words from Anna Walbrecht this morning as well, that we have clarity on when we get awarded towards the FID, that these time spans are not too long, that we do see stable revenue frameworks, either via indexed CFDs or a lively PPA market, which could come via data centers. And last but not least, also data centers think in long term. Let's also think about for wind in longer lifetimes and expansion of lifetime as such.
Terrific. We've covered a lot of ground in a short time. Did. Danielle, thank you so much.
Andrew, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Please enjoy the rest of the day. Right. Our next and final session of the morning, I'm particularly looking forward to, is called It Can't Happen Without China. Or can it? That's what we're going to talk about. And I've got two guests who are going to discuss this. Well, let's welcome them on the stage first. We've got Victoria Karelska from Wind Europe and Horatio Evers from Mingyang Smart Energy. Would you please come up on stage and join me? Victoria, I'll tell you what, why don't you take a seat there? And Horatio, please take a seat there, and I'll stay here. And I've already proved my inability to multitask this morning, because I should say, if you've got questions for our two guests here, you can submit them via the app, and I will attempt to access them, but we'll also try and leave some time for questions at the end, because I think people are going to be very interested in this debate. Let me set the context very quickly before we move into the main session. China has the biggest, by a country mile, wind power industry in the world. It's got the biggest wind deployment, onshore for decades, offshore for a good few years now. That has spawned a very, very large turbine industry, which is very successful domestically in serving that market. I think that's hopefully an uncontentious statement. Some of those turbine makers now are looking to new markets for growth. They're winning orders in the rest of Asia, they're winning orders in the Middle East, they're winning orders in Africa, and in some of those markets, that's a completely uncontentious commercial situation. That's not the case in Europe. It is more contentious, and we're going to hear why. And I think it's fair to say that this is one of the most, I suppose, talked about scenarios in the industry at the moment in Europe, and it's provoked huge interest when we write about it in Recharge. So we've got really two perfect people to talk about this. Victoria, Wind Europe has been outspoken on this issue, that Europe needs to be very wary about accepting Chinese turbines and Chinese investment into its wind industry. Tell us why.
Thank you, Andrew, and good morning to everyone. I would like to zoom out for 1 second before we get into the nitty-gritty details, because the context matters here, and I think it's important to understand where we come from, but also where Europe comes from. Some colleagues in the previous panel mentioned this, but Europe had a huge wake-up call with the Russian invasion in Ukraine. We need to realize that because it was the first time that we saw how our energy dependencies on external providers can actually be weaponized against us. And on the back of this security context, what has increased the awareness of Europe is that obviously we need to be very careful about how we manage such dependencies. And of course, we need to look at the current political context, also not to replace one dependency, which previously was on Russian gas, with another dependency, which could here be on clean technologies from foreign sources. The bottom line here is wind energy is a strategic sector for Europe. This is recognized by politicians, also by the European Commission. We are 20% of Europe's electricity already today. We will need to provide more than 50 by 2050. And we have a huge supply chain in Europe, which is actually one of the last clean technology supply chains that we have. It's more than 250 factories that are producing equipment for turbines and also for grids in Europe. And across the board, it's 400,000 people that are employed in this supply chain. So where Europe is coming from on its policy, it's certainly around making sure that we have the right security element involved in it, and that we also have fair competition on our market. And I think this is really the core of the European rulebook. So long as we have the elements in place, all the players, irrespective of whether they're European or foreign ones, just will be on the same rules and on the same level of engagement. I think this is the starting point that we all need to keep in mind.
Right, so the level, it's not a level playing field, is your contention?
It is not a level playing field, and there have been organizations and studies that have compared and demonstrated, in particular, how different countries are adopting policies regarding clean technologies. This year already we had seen a report from the Organization for Economic Development and Cooperation in Europe, the OECD, as some of you would know it. And it was actually comparing subsidies that European manufacturers and Chinese manufacturers are receiving for clean technologies. It was both for solar and wind. And the conclusion was very, striking, let's say, and it's also very clear that on average, Chinese companies and manufacturers are receiving 4.6% of their revenue from different ways and support from the Chinese state, let's say. It can be tax breaks, it can be supportive instruments from Chinese banks, so different options. That level for European companies was only 0.6. And I think from that perspective, it's also very understandable that, of course, when we talk about the level playing field on the market, the companies really need to play by the same rules of fair competition. And this is at the core of how we also preserve the internal energy market. So this is not something that we can compromise as Europeans. The security angle of this, of course, comes again on the back of what we have experienced after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. You know very well that we have seen multiple attempts at the infrastructure. So, for instance, at sea, subsea cables which have been broken, severed, also cyber attacks that have been attempted on European critical energy infrastructure, be it installations or grid. So also on this aspect, the European Union is very clear that this is something that we need to tackle. We have clear rules, in particular right now on cyber and data security, that will be embedded in European policy, and where all companies will need to comply with, so that we make sure that we are resilient going forward.
Okay. Well, look, Horatio, first of all, I want to thank you for sort of appearing on behalf of Mingyang, a company, but and I understand you're talking for your company, but hopefully you can also address some of these wider concerns, because clearly they touch upon your own ambitions. So, I mean, you've heard there from Victoria pretty clearly, and it's an argument we've become familiar with. Three major concerns. The playing field isn't level. You're subsidised. Whether it's through production or whether it's through the ability to offer finance, there are subsidies going on that are unfair to European competitors, and your security, and by that there are two pillars there: the security of your actual machines in terms of their physical security, their data security, and what is perceived to be by people a kind of geopolitical angle. So address those. Tell us your response.
So first of all, thank you very much for having me, and it's for me a great honor to speak here in Hamburg, where we're just building up our European and international headquarters of Mingyang to become a European company. And what we learned as Mingyang is that I think you raised some very valid and serious topics. I think you cannot participate in the European market without I would say, strong local footprint and with the European organization, because we are, of course, very well aware of this discussion, what we are having in Europe. And as Mingyang, we are very successful in the global markets. We supplying in over 40 countries globally our technology. We are a private listed company, so we are listed in Hong Kong and in London on the exchange. So we are not a state-owned company, which are somehow the long arm from how we see it as a European people, longer arm of the Chinese government. So we are a private company, and we producing high efficient technology what we want to sell into the market. So, and what we learned so far, there are some questions around our business model, what we need to answer. And one of these is, of course, may I start with cybersecurity accusation. And we think we have a concept in our business offer, what we will provide to the market, to give answers on that. Yeah? For example, maybe I touched three different dimensions. So the operator of the business park, he's in full control of the data. Yeah? So he can decide what to do with the data. It's not us, it's not the supplier of the turbine, of the plates, of the cable, it's the operator. It's a local data center in Europe, which is used maybe by other OEMs as well. And the protection of this local data center is regulated in the European market environment. So there is no, I would say, switch or cable to China. So, and there's even no connection to the Chinese data center from Mingyang. So first of all, I think that is, we need to have a fair discussion around the topics. And sometimes I think the accusations, what we are hearing in the market, it's not proved. It's kind of, it's in the room and nobody goes in detail. And we are really open to really go in detail here. Secondly, we are working together with auditors, of course, together with European auditors like TÜV Süd, DNV, and we open up, we give full transparency, and we make proof of what we say. And what we expect is from the other side as well, make proof of your accusation, yeah? Secondly. Yes, and this is actually what we expect and where we work on as a European organization. We will take part in this discussion. And we are not here for short term, we are here for long term, and we will take that up. And I will promise you, you will hear us, you will see us much more often, and we are open to have a fair dialogue with the associations and with the market partners here in Europe.
Okay, we've started with cybersecurity, so let's dig into that a little bit. I mean, you've, I think in the UK, you've announced a partnership with Octopus Energy.
Yes.
I don't think we've heard huge details yet, but as I understand it, there's going to be some sort of tie-up where Octopus's software, or you work with Octopus. I assume provide the type of guarantees that you've been talking about there. How would that work? I mean, tell us about that a little bit.
I think based on our business strategy, Richard, I think we need to partner up with European players, first of all. That is one of the first big leg what we build up in the future. So in all the different parts of the, I would say, value chain, we are open to cooperate. It's not only for data security when we're talking about OEM as well and TNA, what we need to offer to the market as well. We will open up, we are open for collaborations, and we are talking to potential partners at the moment. Of course, we are doing that as well to provide the best model to our customer and clients, but we do that as well to build up trust here in the market. If we are not transparent to you, it's very clear we have no chance in the future. So secondly, when we are selecting partners, like for the topic cybersecurity, we are looking for the best partners in the market. And Octopus Energy is a very well-known and very professional partner in the UK and in the European environment. And we can learn a lot from them. They provide their knowledge in terms of technology, software treatment, even local regulation. And we provide providing our business model, and we work on a solution what we can operate and offer to our clients in the European market environment.
Okay. Victoria, I mean, you've just heard there, let's stay with cybersecurity. So absolutely cast iron ring fencing around projects so that the operator, the developer, has total ownership, total transparency of what's going on. Partnership with European players who are known in the market, e.g. Octopus. Transparency with the likes of DNV to actually look inside at the detail of what's going on. You can't ask for more than that, can you? What's the objection here?
The regulators will decide whether that is enough or not, right? We have European rules which are very clear on this, and you mentioned some of that indeed. Notably the fact that any single time that you operate with an equipment on the European market or you want to access an auction, obviously you need to have the right cybersecurity plan. As you rightfully also said, you cannot export data outside of the European Economic Area, and this is very critical. One thing, nevertheless, which I would caution and mention here is that even if by European law you cannot outsource and get this data out of the European Economic Area, by Chinese law, the Chinese state can still ask a company which is Chinese to provide this data to the government. And I don't know if the audience knows that, but it also needs to be, I think, mentioned and said. So this is also something that we would need to address and see how it plays out from that perspective, because there could indeed be a contradiction in between the rules, and that also poses a certain risk that European authorities are very aware of. By European authorities, I don't necessarily only mean the European Commission that is working on different cybersecurity rules, but I also mean NATO, national intelligence agencies, which in different reports, including here in Germany, have raised concerns around the not only cybersecurity access, but in general, the security element of Chinese equipment. So all of that will really need to be looked very carefully at.
Okay, let's address this head on then, Rachel. I mean, you know, this is fundamental. These concerns are fundamental, and I think the relationship between a piece of equipment owned by a Chinese company and the Chinese state is often mentioned in this respect. So, I mean, Victoria spelled it out there. Ultimately, the data you hold, wherever it is in the world, if necessary, at the request of the Chinese state, has to be made available to the Chinese state. Is she correct?
We don't have access to the data. The data is in the hand of the operator. We don't are owning the data, first of all, part of our concept. Secondly, you need to differentiate between state-owned companies and private-owned companies in China. I don't know if you're so deep in the details around the topic, but there are different regulations for private-owned companies and state-owned companies. Thirdly, we need to answer that question anyway. If we cannot answer this question, and that is my message to you as well, we are not eligible for the European market. We need to find answers, and here we are expecting, and we need a fair discussion with the market participants, including NATO, including governments, including associations, and to come down on a fact-driven discussion. And because if you bring only accusations to us, we cannot answer you. So all what I read so far from a European perspective is a kind of accusation to us, and we do not have the chance for fair dialogue. So when you're talking about a level playing field, a fair one for everybody, so this is one part of the level playing field for me as well. So, and we are open for this kind of discussion. And we will tailor-made, and that is my promise to you, we will tailor-made our business model, what we provide to our client, that you can buy our products. And I remember a study from Wind Europe, it's not actually from this year, but it's 2 years old, that we already have so many Asian, Chinese components in the offshore wind industry. Yeah? I think here we need to be fair. There's already a kind of huge dependency on the Chinese supply chain. It is already there and here, and I fully can understand that you take the position of the local OEMs, but on the other hand, I think we need to tackle the major problems in Europe, and that is for me, our system costs are simply too high. I come in my former life for a very power-intense company, and we work on our strategy to reduce our CO2 emissions in the future until 2030 and 2050, and we worked on fantastic technology solutions to reduce our CO2 in the future. And why did we not invest into these new technologies? It's because simply the prices are too high in Europe. And for me, sometimes the discussion around value chain is for me too short. I think when we discuss the European market, we need to see it holistically. And from a perspective from energy industry, I think we can make the cake much bigger when we are able to lower the electricity costs in Europe. And because then further down the value chain, industry will start to invest into electrification. And here we have a bottleneck, and I'm sure we can do our homework from a Chinese supplier perspective to help Europe here to bring down system costs. And yes, that means we have a stronger and more heavy competition here on a level playing field, which is fair. Yeah, for you, I say you, and us. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask Victoria to respond to that, but specifically on one point you made, just to be clear. So you're saying that as a private company, you have no obligation to the Chinese state to return data, to make data visible, to do anything like that. That's not an obligation you have. That's what.
I think you need to differentiate here. I think first of all, it's a different treatment of a state-owned company and a private-owned company.
Okay.
Secondly, it depends on your data center structure.
Right.
Yeah. So if you have a data center in South China, which is somehow part of the national energy system, there might be a regulation in place which is totally different to European regulation. So our concept in Europe is we are not owning the data center, we are not owning the data. The data goes from the turbine in a data center which is operated not from Mingyang.
Yeah.
So the whole argumentation somehow fails because the setup, yeah, what you use to build up your rationale is differently. Yeah.
But I mean, you'll know there are Chinese laws around national security that specifically say, in the final analysis, we have access to data if it's needed for purposes of.
We are not owning the data.
Okay. Well, this is clearly something that's going to have to be sorted out further because there's a fundamental division.
I hope so. It's a strong interest from my side to bring the facts on the table.
There's a fundamental division, isn't there, of opinion on this?
Absolutely. There are sometimes accusations from reports which some journalists are dropping into the discussion, and we are asking, so where are the facts, where are the reports?
Right.
And they are not there.
Okay.
And that is very difficult for us somehow to really, first of all, to somehow shape our business model for the European market, which is somehow unfair as well, but secondly, to have a kind of transparency in the facts.
Okay. Victoria, I want to pick up on Horatio's point about competition in the market. You heard the sessions earlier, and you speak for the European industry, but you'll know there are developers who have been quite open about the fact, especially in offshore, they're not satisfied with the level of competition in the market. We've effectively now got a duopoly because GE has for now put on ice its plans in the sector. So, they're saying, look, we need competition. We need more than two players in the market. That's healthy. Bring it on. Let us decide whether we want to buy these turbines or not. What's the response?
I think, Andrew, to be also very fair to the colleagues who spoke before, competition, but fair competition. Okay? I think this is important for us to underline. Everybody in our sector is, of course, very much aware that this would be at the core of how we progress forward on the European wind energy market. And as many of you also know, there is also an ongoing investigation by the European Commission into Chinese wind turbines, because the European Commission is suspecting that there could be unfair subsidization. So we are waiting for the results to see about that. The more important point, however, here is on the core conditions in the European market, and I think all the colleagues in the previous sessions alluded to that, which need to be very critically looked at and reinforced. And why I'm saying this? Part of the reason why it has been difficult both on the developer side but also on the supply chain side is because the European market still lacks the optimal scale and speed of wind energy deployment. And this has been the case for many, many years now. And on that perspective, we need to be also very clear to rectify where the industry stands, to improve on the competition, to make us resilient, there are at least 5 things that need to happen. Some of them were mentioned. I just want to spell them out one more time so that it's absolutely clear to the audience. Speed and scale, first of all, is indeed electrification, which has been lagging in the European Union for the last 15 years. In that perspective, China has an electrification rate of 30%.
You can learn a lot.
On that front, we will see, but my point is just to say we need to look into that very, very carefully, because 3/4 already of our energy supply can be electrified with technology that we have today as Europeans. Second thing is permitting. I'm not going to preach to a German audience on permitting because you're the one country that has really done it greatly, and you have unlocked the wind volumes, both for the developers and the manufacturers, but it cannot be one country out of 26 that transposes correctly the European rules on permitting. And we need a fast forward across the European market on the excellent rules that we have, which is with clear deadlines for how long it should take for a developer to receive the permit, which is overriding public interest, which is digitalization, which is one-stop shop. So that is also very clear. Now, on top of the scale and support, you also need clarity on the revenues. That was also mentioned, 2-sided CFDs, the right auction design, indexed auctions. This would be particularly important for offshore wind, and I want to point out one thing which was maybe not clearly mentioned before. When heads of government and state gather in Hamburg next year for the offshore wind summit here, they need to sign off on the new offshore wind deal, which is saying that every year we need to have 15 gigawatts of offshore wind volumes coming to the market, 10 in 2-sided CFDs, 5 top-up with PPAs. And on the back of that, also the supply chain would be able to scale up and bring the cost down for the manufacturing that we have. And last but not least, research and innovation is something which didn't necessarily come up. Europe is very clear that the wind sector would be a key strategic priority, so it also needs to put the money where its mouth is. And from that perspective, we need to increase the spending that we have on research and innovation, and there needs to be a very clear and dedicated pot of money in the next European budget. So these are points on which we need to work.
I doubt you disagree with any of that, would you?
No, of course, I could now add to all your 3 points what Mingyang could bring in as support, all 3 points. Talking about speed, talking about bring technology into the market, talking about innovation. Because my experience is you create innovation not in the laboratory, you create innovation in the production line. And when you see how many turbines are produced in China in the factories and how innovation is developed, it's not only dumping prices, it's creating innovation. It's amazing. Using AI in the quality processes, for example, using robots in, you can visit our new onshore wind factory in Mongolia, which we are using AI and robots in the production process. It's amazing. We are working on bigger turbine sizes. We are coming into the market with 18.5 now, which is actually when we see the first one in Europe soon. We have already built lots of them in the Asian and Chinese environment. So here is innovation created and provided to the European market environment for free.
Okay. I want to leave some time for some questions, but I want to just cut to the, I want to be devil's advocate on both sides. I want to cut to the core of what I think are the, when we delayer the fundamental issues, maybe on both sides. I mean, Victoria, okay, I think everything you've said about the need for the industry to develop and scale up in Europe, I think everybody would agree with. Isn't this just ultimately protectionism by the European industry? Isn't that what it boils down to fundamentally? Is you don't want the competition coming because you've seen what the Chinese industry can do, and effectively it's putting up a border around a market player that could make a real impact in Europe very quickly to the benefit of the energy transition, which is what we're all supposed to be concerned about. Isn't that the fundamental of it?
As I said before, Andrew, ultimately we are operating on a market-based economy in Europe. Competition is the name of the game. We have very clear rules, and as we have said, regulators, European Commission and others will look whether the competition is fair, and if it is fair, then you operate on the European market. I mean, it's as simple as that.
So you'll let the regulators decide. They'll make their decision about whether it's fair or not, and if they say it's fair, if they clear them.
Yeah, the rules of engagement are very, very clear. We have very clear legislation on the European Union side as to how you enter this market and what is expected from a market operator.
Okay. Horatio, I'm going to go to the core of what I think is ultimately you're a company that is operating out of a nation that many in Europe regard as a geopolitical threat. And that's what it comes down to. We cannot ultimately trust that the machines that are put up in some of the most critical parts of our energy infrastructure are going to be secure from being effectively spied on. And let's nail this one. The kill switch. This comes up all the time, right? The kill switch. That a Chinese turbine, somewhere buried deep inside it, will have some kind of kill switch that means it can be deactivated at the behest of the Chinese state. And we've seen reports recently about buses in Norway, having. First of all, address that.
My BMW, you can switch off, by the way, as well.
Okay. Address the kill switch.
It's a kill switch, yeah. So I think I can only talk for our technology and cybersecurity concept. And there is no kill switch inside. And I think, so please bring that on the record. So no kill switch in Mingyang turbines. And I would never signed my work contract with Mingyang when I was not 100% sure what I say here, because I'm European, I'm German. I worked 20 years for a German company with a strong international footprint, but I'm a European and was following for a very long time the discussions in Wind Europe as well, in the association. And so nevertheless, I think we need to be protected against hacker. And if I see our data center structure, which is actually our problem in the market, it's not the Chinese problem, it is our problem in the market where we feed in our data from all OEMs, from all our wind turbines. Here we need to have a kind of protection mechanism to secure us against hacker attacks from outside the world. Yeah, maybe from China, maybe from Russia, maybe from US, I don't know. In the same way, we must think about if we are now being more dependent on natural gas in the future, how do we secure that risks against if someone is losing the motivation to supply natural gas from outside into Germany as well. So it's for me more a question of coming up with a proper national and European risk management. But on the other hand, we need to be competitive in what are we offering to the market. Because when we are not able to offer competitive energy prices, including gas, including renewable energy, which is so important to fight against climate change, then we have a much bigger problem. We are losing track on a global basis, and we are losing the fight against climate warming. So it's for me more a question of risk management, and that is what we need to take up as an industry, as a European industry as well. And part of this is, of course, our technology, and we will come back with a concept what we can sell to our clients. Because as you said, we are getting approached from the EPCs, from the project developer. They expect more competition in the European market, which is very clear to us, but we only can sell our product to them as well when we are actually fulfilling your needs, what you just formulated. Yeah.
Okay. I do want to see if there's any questions, but I just want to briefly, Horatio, if I don't mind, ask you about the UK. I mean, you want to build a big turbine factory in Scotland, and you're waiting for clearance to do that. When are you going to hear? I mean, this has been hanging around now for a long time. I mean, when are you going to hear from the UK whether you're going to be able to do this or not?
I think our offer is on the table, right? We want to invest 1.5 billion in the European market on the continent in UK. And we want to create jobs in an area where jobs are really needed. And we want to, but it's not stopping with our investment into factories. It's we want to build up a local supply chain as well, of course, yeah, and an optimized supply chain as well, and working, of course, with the European supply chain together. And that is clearly on the table. We are waiting for a clearer statement from the government in UK. You are right. So we are impatient. But on the other hand, the signals what we receive from UK are quite positive. Yeah? But on the other hand, we are not only relying on UK, we are looking into the EU environment as well. So we are actively working on localization concepts here as well. And I think maybe in the future, we are talking here more as kind of partners and not kind of, I would not say enemies, but in a such conflicting way.
What happens if the UK says no? Will you look elsewhere in Europe?
Yes,
Will you
of course.
give up?
No, we are not here for short term. Yeah, we are here for long term. We won't give up. We have actually nothing to lose. Yeah, we are now building up our European headquarters here in Hamburg. As former colleague says, Germany is the biggest market and most, I would say, dominant market in the EU. So we go in the middle of the market, building up our headquarter capacities here, becoming a European company. We are here for long term, and we will convince the market with the concept where you can't say no.
Okay, right. Please forgive me if I'm going to hold you from lunch for a few minutes if there are any questions to our two panelists. I can't see anything on the app, but if you want to stick your hand up, I think one of my colleagues will find you possibly with a microphone if you have any questions for our two guests here on what you've heard. Anybody? We have a question there.
Thank you, Frank Witte from ONP Management here in Hamburg. Question would be, when do you plan to roll out the 24 megawatt turbine in China and to global markets? Thank you.
Actually, I expected this question. Thank you very much. First of all, we think the market is ready for 18.5, and including the supply chain. And if we compare this technology to products from competitors, we think that is a solution at the moment for the European market. For the future, we are working on bigger turbine types. We are still working on innovation as OEM. I want to underline that. Innovation is very important. Yeah? Coming up with bigger turbines is good for the market. Sometimes I hear different opinions from European OEMs. Yeah, we still believe in that. We are in the global competition. We need these bigger turbines for other international markets outside of the European Union. Here we have a strong demand. And I expect that we first building these turbines in a Chinese market environment, and then in the next step we come over to Europe. Yeah, and so I would say the direction is clear for us. But regarding the time, I think we won't bring green bananas to the European market. So we will make our experience in the Chinese market environment, and we think the technology is ready. We will bring it in the rest of the world, including Europe.
Anybody else?
That's Petra Sorge from Bloomberg. Mr. Evers, I would also like to know, last month you announced a potential investment in Scotland. You just mentioned that the UK government is looking into this, or you're waiting for a clear sign. Can you give some information on the progress of the talks and what are the hurdles still? And the EU instead is just looking at greenfield investments of third countries. Are you also in talks with the Commission over this possible foreign investment screenings, or what is planned there? Thank you.
Actually, regarding UK and Scotland, we are waiting for a reaction from the British government. We laid out our investment plans, and we mean that very serious. So the offer from us is on the table. But of course, we are expecting a signal from the UK government soon. This is very important for us. And as I said, signals what we received so far are very positive. So secondly, coming to your question for Europe, we are working on a strategy for a local footprint in the EU environment as well. We identified different countries where we see a good infrastructure for our investment on greenfield, and we are at the moment, but and we will of course announce when we proceed here in that planning as well, in a very transparent way.
I have got a couple of questions actually have appeared on the app, so in all fairness I should move to them as well, as they've made the effort to post them. Here's one. So European OEMs have factories and suppliers in China as well. It's hard to believe you're not subsidized by China. What are you doing differently that you can be so much cheaper?
Yeah, I don't know, so much cheaper is, who said that? No, just kidding. So obviously we have a high degree on innovation level. So we are coming in with the 18.5 turbine. If you compare that to a 15 megawatt turbine, you need 20% less turbines, for example. Yeah, that brings you cost advantages. So cost is not only in lower capex prices. Cost comes in, or cost advantages comes in to innovation. Yeah. So secondly, of course, the whole time topic. Speed of infrastructure, speed of maintenance, I think we are very professional in that. So we bring in a lot of experience here as well. So in the OPEX cost, you will see cost advantages as well. And of course, in the way how we produce our technology. Yeah, because we have a kind of mass production in China as well. And it is a smart way to produce that technology, and sometimes we can do it better than maybe our competitors in the market. Yeah? And thirdly, we are not setting the market price in Europe, by the way. The market price is set by the OEMs in Europe. So when you say we are cheaper, we only can talk about our price, what we offer to the market, but the market price is set in the European market environment. So if you want to lower the prices in Europe, you need to bring in more competition. It's very easy. Yeah.
Okay, one more from the app, and I think I'm going to have to call it a day because I'm going to get in trouble for overrunning too much, but there's been huge interest. This is from Matthew Delaney of Azure Insights. What do you believe the earliest project CODs in Europe could be with Chinese turbines in a direct import from China scenario versus a fully localized European setup? So the question of bringing turbines in from China. When do you think we could see project CODs?
I think, as you know, you're all from the industry. It is a question: how can we synchronize all the different processes to one process? Yeah. So there are the tender going on, the AR7, AR8 in UK as well, And that it needs somehow synchronized, of course, to our investment into a local factory, where we need to have a kind of approval by the British government. So you need to bring all these bits and pieces together, you need to win the project, you need to get the approval from the government, and so on and so on. And there is for sure ideal world where you could say, if we get everything perfect on the right time, we can start in 2 years with local production here in Europe. But then the reality kicks in, and let's see. I cannot predict that, but I can tell you we are very quick in that, and that is exactly the reason why we are now building up the teams here in Europe, and why we are building up our partner collaboration strategy with the different partners in the value chain. Yeah.
Okay.
I hope this is okay as answer.
I'm going to thank both of you for being so open and engaging with this process so openly. It's been great. I've kept you all from lunch. I'm sorry about that, but I hope you'll agree it's for a good reason, because we've had a good and interesting session. I'm going to thank my two panelists. I'm going to invite you all to go for lunch, and I would like you to be back. At what time do you need to be back? You need to be back at 1:20. 1:20. Thank you. Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you too. Very good.